Hey, good evening, everybody. A few dropped frames there at the beginning of the webcast. I had GR Level 2 fighting here with the streaming software, but I went ahead and shut that off for now. But you can enjoy the look at the tropical storm, scud cloud moving kind of northeast to southwest towards the center of the storm there, or what's left of it. And the basis on a lot of those clouds there, you can see that this is like stratus, probably about 1,500 to 2,000 feet up, and it's just kind of representative of the very humid air that we've got outside. And right now, there's what it looks like at this time. We've got a very steady rain coming down outside, and it's only 74, contrasting very sharply with 91, 92 degree temperatures that we usually see at this time during the afternoon. Okay, let's head into the charts and take a look at what's happening across Texas. We've got Harvey, which is weakened down to a tropical storm, and not much left in the wind field. We do have a few strong gusts. These are all the federal observation sites. We can see that Austin, I think this station here, I think that's Camp Mabry. Let me zoom in on that, and they are reporting some pretty strong winds there. And actually, I think that's the airport. So yeah, okay, they've got winds out of 030, so that's north-northwest, 30 gusting to 47 knots. So to convert that to miles an hour, we multiply times 1.15, so we're getting about 34 miles an hour, gusting to 53. So that's a pretty good windstorm there at Austin. Elsewhere, San Antonio getting a little bit of a breeze there, gusting up to 27 and 30 knots there. A little bit weaker in the Brazos River Plain around College Station. Texas A&M there, those guys are getting about 31 out of the northeast. And in the Houston area, about 27 to 29, but surprisingly in our area, kind of at the junction of northeast Texas, north central Texas, and east Texas. I don't know what you would call that, but we've got very little wind here, probably just about 3 or 4 miles an hour, not much left. But you can see a lot of observing sites completely offline in this area. Only Corpus Christi getting readings from that. You can see Rockport and Port Aransas, Victoria, all of that down. And here's how much rain has fallen. This is from the U.S. Geological Survey. These are 24-hour, let me get this out of the way here. These are 24-hour rainfall amounts ending at 7 p.m., about an hour ago. So you can see we've got one little reading of 22.48 inches. This is measured rainfall, and a couple of spots of 8 to 9 inches. And this is about what the models have been forecasting up to this point. The true 20 and 30 inch amounts, that comes later around midweek when we've had day after day of rainfall. That's when we start seeing the 20 to 30 inch rainfalls in this area right here along I-10 between Austin and Houston and down towards the Gonzales area. This 22.48, that was at McFadden in Refugio County, just south of Victoria. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of very isolated 10 and 15-inch amounts in here in between the observing sites. But outside of that, you can kind of see the influence of the dry air spiraling around. Very little rain west of San Antonio, very little west of the hill country, just some very small amounts out that way. Okay, let me go ahead and get the radar started, and hopefully this doesn't affect the connection too much. So I'm going to start that downloading, and that requires us to download probably about 5 to 10 megabytes of data. So while that's going, we'll take a look at the charts here. Got a much different picture from what we had yesterday. Center of the circulation. This could be smoothed over, but the rapid refresh model going for 997 millibars. So that would be in the range of tropical storm there. But the system pretty far inland, about 50 or 60 miles in. It went a little bit further north than what we were expecting. In fact, it kind of ended up in this area about 4 or 5 in the morning, about the time I went to bed, and it's been stationary there all day. And the stronger amounts of rainfall, those are going to be just along and to the right of the track. So that puts it in the Gonzales, Cuero area, and possibly down to the Victoria area. So we're going to probably see some very strong, very high rainfall amounts in that area over the next day or two. Along the outer spiral bands out in this area, this is where we've been seeing some tornado warnings today. One little spiral band right here, this is probably the main one. This has kind of emerged eastward. It was in this area earlier. It's pushed northeastward, and we're seeing it kind of entering the Houston area very, very gradually. And then there's another outer spiral band in this area from around the Crockett to Lufkin down to about Lake Charles. And there have been a few tornado warnings on that also. We should be at least able to, yeah, okay, the radar's up, so that's good. You can see the center of circulation just south of Gonzales, Texas. So we can zoom in, and that's very easy to pick out. You just follow the spiraling, and we've got the center of the circulation about halfway between Cuero and Gonzales right there. To the right of that, you can see the heavier rainfall amounts from LaGrange down to Hallettsville, down to Edna, and out to Columbus. And then out in this region, this is where we have the outer spiral bands. We have one tornado warning. This area has been pretty hard hit, the area west of Alvin and west of Richmond, or actually in the Richmond area, down to Port Jackson. Another tornado warning in that area. And of course, this is radar indicated rotation, but certainly the potential there for something on the ground. And you can see the isolated nature of all the cells. And it's not just the isolated nature of the cells, but it's the high shear environment. We haven't quite dissipated that highly sheared, low-level environment from about the surface up to 1 kilometer. What's happening is down at the surface, we got winds kind of light out of the northeast, kind of like this. Relatively light, 10 to 20 knots. And then aloft, we've got kind of an easterly flow feeding into the storm, much stronger, about 50 to 60 knots, and that gives us what we call curved photographs. In this area here, particularly favored. Generally, the left front quadrant, or the right front quadrant, that's what tends to be favored there. Let me zoom that out for you guys. That's the right front quadrant, and that's what we tend to watch when we have these hurricanes making landfall. That's kind of a favorite area for tornadoes. And you can see the outer spiral band. The radar data doesn't go out that far from San Antonio, but one morning around Sabine National Wildlife Area. It's going to be Central Cameron Parish, southwest of Lake Charles, and that'll probably be spiraling northwestward towards Jasper and Newton in Texas. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on with the storm there. Let's take a look at some of the satellite data. Bring this up to today, the 26th. And there's a good look at the Harvey there from the Polar Orbiter. This is the Aqua satellite data. And we can still see a bit of an eye right there around the Cuero area of Texas. There it is right there. And we can probably see that on the GOES imagery. Let me try to pull that up here. Yeah, there we go. It still has that appearance of a hurricane even though it's inland. And this is the last 20 images from about 5 or 6 in the afternoon until about 8 o'clock this evening. And you can see the overshoots right there around the Richmond area, around Alvin, and a couple of other overshoots in the Lake Charles area. So those are poking up above the cirrus outflow layer, signaling the presence of cumulonimbus clouds building up pretty high. So that's another indicator you can use, visible satellite imagery during the day, and you can pick out those higher tops. Infrared imagery will show that to a certain extent. There's a cold top right there. That's that Richmond storm with that outflow, that outer spiral band right there, and then the secondary spiral band right there through the Lake Charles area. So we can see a cold top on that also. So that's another way to look for very strong cells when you don't have a good radar coverage, especially if the radar's been taken out by a landfalling hurricane, and that does happen from time to time. Okay, well, we do got weather elsewhere around the country, so let's take a look at that. And trying to think of where to start. I guess we'll start with the thickness chart. Get back to the basics here, and this is the isobars and thickness. So here we've got the red lines indicating thickness, and we can think of that as an average temperature in the lowest 3 miles of the atmosphere. So this is better than just using spot temperatures of temperature, spot readings of temperature near the ground. This kind of considers the entire atmospheric column in the lowest 3 miles. So we can see that cooler air is present over Quebec and northeast U.S. right in this area here. And the warmer air is located in the desert southwest out in this area. So here it's kind of forming a ridge over the west coast, and the cooler air forming a bit of a trough over the east coast. And that does kind of shape the upper level patterns. So we're going to expect to see a jet stream kind of set up like that right there. And with that ridge off to the west, that's what's helping to keep the hurricane from, or the remnants of the hurricane from moving north. To really lift that out of Texas, we need to see an approaching trough, something like that, and we don't have that anywhere near Texas right now. So ridging out to the west, and that's going to mean very slow movement for the remains of Harvey as it meanders across Texas. As far as cold fronts, I think we got a little bit of a cold front coming through the Carolinas, maybe down to Florida, something like that. Very weak cold front, modified from cold air moving across the central Atlantic states there, and maybe a little bit of a backdoor front coming into Arkansas, a little bit of a northeasterly flow, and that's feeding into the remains of Harvey. And maybe a bit of a stationary front up in the northern states, something like that, because we can see a thickness gradient between Utah, Wyoming, and Saskatchewan and Manitoba. So that would be something to watch if we have an approaching trough. And then further up in Alaska, we can see an active front out in the Gulf of Alaska, somewhere out in this area. And we might place it something like that right there. So the cooler air out over the Gulf of Alaska right there, and then the warmer air located out over British Columbia and Washington. So that kind of shapes up the picture for the U.S. and gives us a good idea what might be coming for the next few days. Okay, we'll head to some of the other charts, and this is the 250 millibar chart. This is up at about 34,000 feet. And we'll zoom in so you can see that a little bit better. And this is showing that big ridge, kind of like what we said, big ridge over the western U.S. And within this, the core of that ridge, that's where we find very warm temperatures. So if we go over to digital atmosphere and look at plotted temperatures Let's bring that up. We should see some very hot temperatures in Arizona. And indeed, 114 at Lake Havasu City, 113 at Blythe, 106 at Phoenix, and 104 there in Las Vegas. And then with the troughing out over the eastern coast, we're going to see cooler temperatures out in that direction. And sure enough, let me remove some of this crowding. There you go. It's a little bit better. So 68 degrees there at Washington, D.C., and look at upstate New York, upper 50s. That would really be nice here in Texas about now. And up in Vermont and New Hampshire, 59, 57 up in that area. And it's been like that most of the summer. Very persistent pattern. Northwesterly flow bringing polar air from Canada into the northeast U.S. And the opposite has been true for the western U.S., where we've had wildfires there in British Columbia and above normal temperatures. Been a very brutal season out there on the west coast. And then here's a quick look at the surface data. This is the Canadian surface chart, useful for the U.S. too. And we can see the cold polar high over Quebec and the Great Lakes area right there, 1027 millibар high. And there's the cold air. You can see the northerly flow there in the Atlanta, Knoxville, and Charlotte area. And then that becomes easterly flow over the Arkansas area. That's kind of sort of like dry air moving southwestward towards Texas and towards Arkansas. So very pleasant nights for that area, the upper Mississippi Valley. Let me shift that down a little bit. Yeah, so very pleasant nights for this region right here, the mid-Mississippi Valley, Tennessee, and some of that air affecting Texas too, and that's what's helping with the 74-degree temperatures that we have right now. Some of that dry air allowing a little bit of evaporational cooling as it feeds into the remains of Harvey here. Okay, so what do we have coming up for the next few days? Let's take a look. This is the high-resolution rapid refresh. Looking at Harvey there between Gonzales and Cuero. Model has got that position pretty well, and we can see one spiral band right there and the other near Lake Charles. That's 1Z. I guess there's probably a little bit of a positional error. I think the position is a little bit more like that, a little bit closer to the Houston area. Yeah, let's check that out real quick. Yeah, we've got that band coming into the Katy and yeah, down to the Alvin area. Let me see if I can get the roads to come up here. There we go. So there's a better look at those storms. And in fact, maybe I can go ahead and bring up the Houston radar, since that's certainly the bigger weather in Texas besides the rain. Okay, so we're loading the Houston radar. And we got a couple of tornado warnings, one for western Harris County right here. This is near Addicks Park. They got a possible tornado moving north at 25 miles an hour. It's a big change from the 40 miles an hour we saw yesterday. So that kind of gives you some indication of how the flow in this storm is starting to slow down a bit. Okay, let me take a look at the chat real quick and scroll through here, and I guess you can look at the radar. Joseph Morris, going to be a meteorologist. Yeah, good luck, and you can check in here every night, and we usually go over new stuff every day. We've got Mick here, one of our regulars, also Ryan Toomies, Sue M, and Darklight. Jaded A Cynical is here. Remember Jaded from yesterday. Ryan talking about Invest 92L rotating around the Florida west coast. Yeah, we're going to see that on the model data, so we'll check that out. That's going to go up the Carolinas coast here in a couple days. Justin mentioning lots of trees down, power outages in the area where Harvey stalled, and I've heard that around Port Aransas there is significant damage there out on that barrier island where the town is. Justin says AEP reported one strand of 50 down poles on 77 in Victoria. So yeah, power problems there in the Victoria area. We have Fun with Tech here, Storm Chaser from Southwest Missouri. Fun with Tech is one of her regulars. Carl Berghoff mentioned a Packers game going on, but hard to resist coming in for the weathercast. Yeah, appreciate that, Carl. Ryan is mentioning a great video of the eye wall coming in from Jeff Petrosky. Yeah, Jeff is kind of like the go-to person for good storm video, so I'm sure that video is on YouTube or possibly Twitter there. Ryan mentions a 1 hour 47-minute video. Tornado warned cell shot out like a bomb on the visible satellite from Justin Pulliam there. And just kind of quickly scrolling through here, tornadoes have been numerous on the northeast side of this post-hurricane there from Ryan. And Ryan says some great footage coming from homeowners out and about looking around. Okay. So yeah, here's the next spiral band coming into the Houston area. We'll just kind of animate this, and you can see that the general movement of the line is to the north. The individual cells, they are probably moving a little bit, maybe to the northeast, I think, maybe a little bit north-northwest like that. But yeah, they're starting to come into the west side of Houston there, and gradually this will shift up into the Houston area, and then later on probably out to Conroe and the Woodlands and that area there. And this is the next spiral band over. This had the tornado warning earlier when we started the webcast, probably on, I would guess probably this cell here earlier. And then there's more upstream that'll be moving into the Orange and Jasper area. Okay, so that's what's going on there. So just, you know, if you're in the Houston area, keep a watch on those tornado advisories there, because it should be a little bit rough here for the next hour or two as this line comes through. You can see they're just all lined up offshore, and those will be rolling in here over the next hour or so, and there's no way to tell which one is going to become severe. The techniques for forecasting these, they do tend to be reactive, just because we just don't have the small-scale data to sample what's going on in each storm. Okay, let's head back to that high-resolution rapid refresh and see what's going to happen to the system overnight. We're looking at it becoming stationary and maybe around 1 to 2 in the morning, maybe a slight southward drift. So it looks like it's backing up towards the coast a little bit. And the movement with these tropical storms, they tend to follow where the most latent heat release has taken place, and a lot of that's happening out in this area right here, also out in the Gulf. The main problem is a lot of the water temperatures here, it's kind of a shallow water body here, so a lot of the warmer temperatures have kind of been dissipated here. But inland, this area here is not very good for allowing the storm to persist, so the models are kind of backing that out towards the coastline. And let's see what the NAM has got. This is the forecast, and then for tomorrow night when we do the webcast, we've got the system just inland around the Corpus Christi area according to the NAM here. And then Monday's coming up, and then on Monday we've got it back around Rockport, and spiral bands and precipitation's shield continuing to affect the Houston, I-10, and Victoria area, so not much relief there. And this is what's really going to pile up the 10 to 20 inch precip amounts. Then we get to the end of the run there for Wednesday, and we've got the thing pretty much quasi-stationary. The European model, let's see what the solution is on that. Okay, we've got the center analyzed at 984 there this morning. By tomorrow morning, it's going to fill to 997 and then drift offshore by Monday morning. So I think that movement is probably a little more on target there, because these systems will return out to the warmer water bodies here. And then we see the temperature dropping to 992 by Tuesday morning, and then down to 987, so intensifying a little bit there along the coast around the Port Lavaca area around midweek. And then we see it moving inland, and I think this is probably where the models are going to start diverging here around midweek. So there goes the system, and then we see a big change on the way here for next week. About a week from now, big cold, high pressure moving in from Canada. So that's going to have probably a big impact on the central U.S. as that moves southward. This is the kind of high pressure area that gives us wintry weather, highs in the teens and 20s during the winter. So we're going to see definitely a cool down, probably some highs in the 70s throughout Texas, maybe even a few 60s in Oklahoma and Missouri. So that's going to be nice, and probably some even cooler temperatures there at night. And then let's see what we've got with the GFS. For Monday, for tomorrow night, we've got the system right around the Corpus Christi area, very little movement. Then for Monday's webcast, Monday night, we've got the system around the Rockport area, continued precip from Houston out towards Victoria. And then we've got the earlier solution here. It looks like it's got the wave opening up into the Rio Grande and dissipating by Friday. So that's a little bit different from what the European model has got. European has that lifting up to the north in advance of the next wave. So I don't really have any thoughts on which way it's going to go, but we know for sure over the next 3 days there's going to be tremendous rainfall southeast and east of San Antonio. And then towards the end we see the next front coming down, so this is going to completely change the weather. The GFS has this with a little bit more of a southeastward push rather than a south push like the European model has got. But by the 3rd, just more cool weather heading into the northeast U.S. There's the front coming south, and the warm front through New York. And then north of that we've got the occluded front coming into the low pressure area right there in Ontario. So the high pressure area, you can see only 10-18 millibars. We don't have the 10-28 that the European model does, but I'm going to hope that the European model is right, because we really need some of that cool air coming down into Texas. And yeah, okay, maybe this is what we're looking for. Yeah, this is a 1036 millibar high. So that's good. We've got the GFS and the European model in agreement. Very, very strong high pressure area, very strong funnel system for this time of year. Very unusual. And there it comes sweeping down the plains. Very strong cold air advection, and you see this 540 line. That tends to be associated with wintry precip. And it looks like that's probably going to end up in North Dakota by the 6th and 7th, and maybe even in, look at that, it goes all the way down to Iowa and Chicago. So this is going to be a heck of a cold outbreak if this holds together. That'll be in the Texas area probably by the 7th, 6th or 7th. So we'll have to wait a while. Things could change between now and then, but that'll give us something to look forward to. And any dry air that we have coming in from the north, that'll help alleviate the situation down there on the Gulf Coast. Okay, yeah, then we've got another hurricane being indicated by the GFS. Look at that. This is 360 hours out, but there's a lot of potential for this to change direction and possibly head into the Gulf or head up the coast. So we'll need to keep an eye on that right there. And then we've got that other disturbance. Let me back that up and go back to the NAM. In fact, I'm going to bring up the NHC forecasts. We've got our mind totally focused on Harvey here, but this is the disturbance that we're talking about. Let's see if we can get a forecast on that. Yeah, so a little discussion about that, but I think the NAM was picking that up. Let me see if I can find that. Okay, here we go. So running this back, there's that disturbance over Florida, kind of a tropical depression. It's kind of a warm core system, and as it emerges out into the Atlantic, we've got kind of a ripe area for development, and you can see it just kind of goes up the Carolinas coast there around midweek. It's not a hurricane. Just looking at this by itself, that's probably just going to be like a tropical storm. And it looks like it picks up some of the cool air, so maybe a little bit of baroclinicity in that system. And let's see what the GFS has for that. In fact, let me look at the European model too. Okay, here's the European model. This is Tuesday morning. There it is. Wednesday morning, okay, strong recurvature, so that's not going to even affect Cape Cod according to the European model, so neither Long Island nor Cape Cod nor the northeast U.S. And then let's see what the GFS has. Okay, here it is coming up the coast on the Carolinas on Monday. So very similar to the NAM there. And then strong recurvature, so yeah, even that, we're not looking for the GFS to bring that up into the northeast U.S. So anyway, so that looks like more cool, dry weather for the northeast and very little impact from this system here. Okay, let's see here. One last look at chat, and let me bring up the radar. There's that line of storms coming into the Houston area. I'll see if we can pick up any strong cells. I'll switch over to the storm relative velocity. And we're looking at it from down here around Alvin. So that's between Houston and Galveston. And we are picking up kind of a strong circulation in this area right here. Let me set a storm motion here. That'll probably help. Because we do have to subtract out the storm motion. Otherwise, it looks like everything is going the same direction, and it gets hard to interpret the data. So there we go. Now we can see the couplet really stands out in southwest Houston. So that's a couplet right there. There's motion going towards the radar and motion going away. And we're seeing what looks like probably about 20 knots into the radar and 31 out, so only about 40 or 50 knots a shear. That's not very much. Let's go down a little bit lower. For some reason, I had that up at 1.3 degrees. Yeah, a little bit of circulation right here. This is going to be around Meadows Place. That's a kind of a tight couplet. Let me put a dot there. So let's check out the reflectivity and see what the storm looks like. So, yeah, we're seeing maybe a little bit of kind of a hook feature there, perhaps. So, yeah, that's outbound. Let me see what magnitude we have. 16 in and 23 out. That's not particularly strong. That's only about 40 knots of shear across 1 mile. But that would be something we would have to watch there. And then another thing we can look at, kind of judge the magnitude of these storms, is echotops. For example, we've got a top here of 51,000 over northwest Houston. But we do have to be careful because of two things. One is the strong shear, which causes the towers to kind of lean over. The other thing is the bowl effect. You can kind of see this how we've got this kind of radial appearance to the echotops. That's because the radar can only tilt up to 19 degrees, so we're missing a lot of data directly over the radar sight. But that 51,000 top right there, that's definitely present, so we can certainly use that in our forecast. Let me see if I can pull that up on the higher tilts. Yeah, this is up at 15.6 degrees and down on the bottom. Yeah, you can see I'm moving the cursor here over it, and it's showing 46,000 over northwest Houston. So, pretty strong storm there, and strong echotops there, so obviously there's some pretty strong tilt going on from those towers there. So anyway, they are kind of lined up, and they are moving gradually northward. So, like I said, you'll just have to kind of monitor Weather Service radio or your favorite sources there, and keep tabs on these warnings here, and look for potentially more of those as those move into the Houston area. Okay, well anyway, I've got quite a bit of catch-up work to do here. I'm trying to get Digital Atmosphere finished. I've got people waiting on that, so I got to get back to work on that. So I'm going to probably go ahead and wrap it up here. I appreciate you all watching, and hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow night. Let me take a look at chat real quick, and we got Linda T. from Virginia. Sister has family in Houston and Austin. Very concerned. I'm sure your family will be fine as long as they're not living like in a floodplain or anything like that. There are, like I said, tornadoes associated with these outer bands, but those tend to be weak tornadoes, like down in the F0 to F1 range for the most part. So as long as they're prepared for that and keeping an eye on the warnings, they'll be fine. Ryan says, welcome newcomers. Please hit the like button. I appreciate that. And weather uneventful in northern Indiana. And let's see here. How does Austin look? Windy. Austin is definitely windy, but that storm there is going to be, remember, it's going to be stationary down there between Corpus Christi and San Antonio, and that's going to be slinging a lot of this precip westward into the I-35 area. So I would be looking for a strong flood potential in the Austin area down to San Marcos and New Braunfels. So this could be kind of like a repeat of the I think it was May 2016, where we had that flooding situation. We could see a bit of a repeat of that. I don't think the ground is too saturated leading into this event, but still I think we're going to see a lot of 10 to 15 inch amounts making it into this area here. So 3 or 4 days of rain, yeah, that's definitely going to have an effect there. All right, that's about all I got. I appreciate y'all watching, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow night. Take care, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.